Hello, I'm Eleanor Hayward here today on Skyward TV. Really thrilled to be sharing information about spirituality and mental health on the path of truth and reconciliation, of the path of decolonization. So if you're interested in personal and planetary wellness, you're in the right space today. A brief land acknowledgement. As a settler descendant, I am acknowledging the past and current stewards of this land, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, Huron, and Haudenosaunee peoples. As we gather today on these treaty lands, I am in the Burlington area today. We have the responsibility to honor and respect all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We're subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to care and peaceably share this region around the Great Lakes. It's an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and allied nations, and the relationships here around the Great Lakes. And may our organization live up to this agreement with reverence towards truth and reconciliation. And we acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing your territory with us. And today, personally, I am very grateful for the bountiful harvest. Having some fresh nectarines and tomatoes and corn from Southern Ontario has been a blessing. It was a beautiful day yesterday, and sharing space with the pollinators and the birds. Very grateful for the connections that this land waters provide us. And so grateful today to welcome Jody Harbour. She is a co-founder of Grandmother's Voice, identifying as an urban Indigenous woman from Oakville for over 30 years. The grandmothers say that great change is coming, and for those who have been sleeping, it's time to awaken the medicines within. We need to become more conscious as a collective of our surroundings, each other, and how we move forward in harmony. These are some of the qualities of Grandmother's Voices vision, and all are welcome to get involved. Welcome, Jody. You're on mute. Would love to welcome you and share with us some of your personal and professional background as to why spirituality and mental health are important to you.
Ooh, hey, nice to see you, Eleanor. Sister friend, not just an acquaintance. We've been building relationship for several years, and you continue to show up and, with a full open heart. And I love this. I had some medicine going here. So, you were just acknowledging all the things you're grateful for, and the land acknowledgement and Yawa for sharing your words and, your essence that shows up through how you started to acknowledge truly from your heart. We see it. I see it and I acknowledge it. And I acknowledge this space and place and platform that you're providing for people to come together in this time of healing. And so I had my medicine going, some sage and tobacco, sweetgrass, and some cedar sitting with me. And then as I started to acknowledge you, it was started, smoking more. And so, I really felt like I needed to share this smudge, and just really for myself to be able to sit with you and speak my truth in these words. I don't, I always try to plan, like, give me a heads up. What are we talking about? But, when we're talking about this kind of information, speaking from your heart and connection, there's really no way to prepare, because, I know I'm here to share with you my story and just, why and how, I just as a woman really wanting to know more and more connection, I just, didn't realize how much my Indigenous bloodline, intergenerational trauma, intergenerational, just everything that I carried from, that I didn't even have the consciousness of. I didn't know that I was even living with this connection. I always knew I was Indigenous growing up. My great grandmother was of the Cayuga Nation, on from my dad's side. And he's, my dad was gone actually. It was 30 years this year. And him and his mom and my great grandma, his grandma, all died of used to just say suicide, but I think it's more colonial and societal suicide. Not being welcome, not having a place in society. From the I guess the plague of alcoholism, the plague of genocide, the plague of raping and pillaging land. Like, this is the truth. And I had no idea. I just, in my mind, remembered the time I spent with my father growing up when, we were shunned from restaurants. And I didn't even really think of it. As an urban Indigenous woman, I went through life and he passed away. And my mother was, is such an amazing woman. Has always, said to us that, she never understood his illness or never understood his pain. But what she did was she always told us how proud he was to be an Indigenous and an Indian, but always instilled in us to be proud that we were Indigenous. So, or a proud Indian. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. And so one day I feel like I woke up when I was in pain, like just chugging through life, like probably everyone else, surviving. Because I think that was the time that we've been in for the last, centuries. We're just surviving. Visitors were coming and people were trying to find a new life and a better world. And then we woke up, in the last 10 years, however many it's been from, Truth and Reconciliation. It was long before then. Our ancestors knew that we were being colonized. And our ancestors knew before that we were going to be colonized. And so when I look at, spaces like this where we get to speak about, who I am, what I know for sure, like I'm an expert in my own life. And I will never, I will never say that I'm, an elder or have knowledge. I have my own, that can teach other people. I believe that my being from my life experiences will teach other people by me just being who I am, and sharing, times like this. So thank you so much for my heart to yours and, everyone behind you that is making this opportunity happen, to be able to share that, we're in a time that we can acknowledge our connection to our ancestors. And that's pretty much what happened to me in a time of pain and struggle and wanting balance in my life. And, I found myself on the land, praying to the earth, sitting under a tree and crying and asking for, clarity, asking for strength, saying, I surrender. Tell me, show me how to be a good woman, how to be a good mom, how to just show up in society so that I can add to the society in a good way. And that's what I did. I asked the sun. I had no idea in that moment that I was doing what my ancestors wanted me to do. And when I asked and promised myself in that moment, connected to the ground and the air and, the elements and the animals around me, I said, I will watch. I promise I will watch. I promise I'll pay attention. I promise I'll listen. Just tell me how to do this in a good way. And, it started to happen. Things just started to happen. Phone numbers came out, fell out. People, the people that I would bump into or interact with in life, they showed up with a purpose or a meaning. They showed up with, something to teach me. They weren't just, somebody walking past me. So I'm here to just talk about that. And I'm honored.
And those connections to the air, the trees, the land, your ancestors, like we're all connected there. And I think that's why I'm passionate. I first heard about the residential schools, I think it was about 2013, when there was a presentation at the Halton Regional Building, and it was just a fry pan to the face to me that I'd never heard of this before. And I believe there was a hunger strike by an elder woman in Ottawa as well at the time, and just trying to get the attention of people. It's been more in the news, I think, more in people's consciousness since the 215, I believe was the number, and it's grown exponentially since when the children were found in the burial sites near the residential school sites, which were really institutional colonial structures, a partnership between church and state. And I understand that colonization is very much an institutional, structural, policy-driven issue of extraction and exploitation of resources and people, and that there's, you use the word genocide, and I think it's really important to acknowledge these big words, because we're here to talk about spirituality and mental health, and I think that's really important. But that's the goal of truth and reconciliation, is you have to tell the truth first before we can reconcile. And how do we shift the mindset? How do we shift the values of what's normal in this culture and what we take for granted? Because I think that this really presses upon people in how they think and how they feel and how they behave. And like when I hear that you said that you weren't welcome in restaurants, that just breaks my heart. And I want to learn more about what colonization and decolonization mean to you, with this overarching theme of Skyward TV and the spirituality and mental health. Can you speak to that, please, Jody? It's a big loaded question.
Yeah, I'm like, what? That's a lot, but it's the reality. And I think, first, I want to say, again, go back to, who I am and, what right do I have to sit on this platform with you, right? So anyone else could be sitting here. I just want to say that there are so many other people that have a story like mine. I don't look Indigenous enough. I'm not Indigenous enough. I wasn't raised on a res. But what I know is my truth is that I'm connected. I'm connected to spirit. I'm connected to self. I'm connected to people, that land. And, when I look at, what our society is today, I'm not afraid. I feel like there is hope, there's change coming. I see my children are very different than how I was growing up. And I think that is a part of the colonization. Obviously, we are, even though they have a lot of other, straight up issues. I think that they're seeing it, right. And you talk about a fry pan. I think every day these kids get fry pans, from social media and what's happening out there. And our political system is going to, everything is in chaos right now, in a sense that they're and so we talk about mental health, which is to me, more mind, right? Because we use that word mental and automatically it takes you to a negative, way of thinking. So, just knowing that where we are today and where I'm at, I'm one of those people that my mind goes everywhere, right? And probably tell even with my conversation, right? It's just, I have so much to say, but I really at some point had to really choose, what is my purpose? What is my purpose with Grandmother's Voice? What is my purpose right now and role in society, and where I show up is to just be I don't even know where to start with colonization. All I know is it messed up the people. It messed up the minds of the people. It disconnected them from their spirit. And, everything that I say here is shared knowledge. I acknowledge all of the elders that I support right now and work with, that I've, when I was out somewhere in an event, or I saw online, someone shared something in words that resonated with my spirit, my soul, my mind. And so when I repeat it, I acknowledge everyone that I've been with in my past, because as I'm speaking, I'm hearing and seeing, those elders and people that have shared these words with me as well. So, but I know that we are in a time of great healing. And, when they say education, is what got us into this mess. And, Murray Sinclair that mentioned that, right? Like, and we just automatically took that on, and we're like, education needs to get us out of this. And what does that mean? And so we're just like a society that's all caught up in what is said in language. And I really believe that we're in a time that the language is going to come from our spirit, and it's going to come in whatever form that resonates with you. And we know as people, some of us, have more gifts than others in creative ways. And so for me, colonization is what you choose, and that resonates with you to look at, because we can't do it all. We can't look at it all from all of these different angles of what it means. And there's so much out there, but what I do know is the colonization of this country was to control.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You change the minds of the people, and through the systems of oppression that have been created through colonization, government, education, all of these systems that they control from the money, right, is what has changed the minds of the people.
Mm-hmm. And
we don't even know it. A lot of people, and when we say we're just waking up, I think that's what people are realizing, that this country, we call it, was in Turtle Island, North America, the world, right, was created off of capitalism, control, and we just were surviving. But now we're awake. And so we have to choose what part of colonization we want to make a difference in, because I think we can get crazy with where do we go first? What do we do? And, self-care, from what I know from from just understanding Indigenous ways of knowing now and Indigenous life ways, is when you take care of self and you understand who you are, what you need to do to make yourself well, is when you'll have impact in society in a good way. And then you can choose, where you're want to go to change, to decolonize. But until you decolonize yourself, which is right through mental health, mind, body, spirit, wellness, you'll never know your true self. You can say you do, but you never will until you really focus on self. That's just me. That's where I was. And I was, when I woke up and stood on the land and asked for that clarity, I knew I was Indigenous, but I didn't go the Indigenous route. I did yoga. I went to, church in my earlier world. I did other things. I read a lot of different authors from different areas of the world. And then all of a sudden it was this, like, you asked, here you go. Here's your Indigenous knowledge. Here's your Indigenous roots. And so now you've asked, it's going to be very clear. Your path will be very clear. And so, I committed to the good, the bad, the ugly. and that's what to me life is about, is finding that balance. How do you manage the good, knowing that the bad could be around the corner, and knowing that, the good will show up again. And I like to think that, realizing and understanding the world, the Western world, and what it did to my family before me, my responsibility is to undo that and decolonize that through my wellness.
So beautiful. So powerful. Jody, I hear you. What a layered, textured conversation. I think like two words are coming forward to continue, that there's connection and then there's trauma. And I think trauma leads to disconnection. So how do we reconnect? And we talked about overthinking, like this mental health aspect. Personally speaking, spirit showed me, because I was on that same path. And I had one point I was like gasping for air, and had a crying fit that was stimulated by a color. It was something so simple, a lime green color. It was a chakra. But I realized that I was an overthinker. Like I'd had some insight into how even like drama, like there's a lot of addictions that when we're disconnected and we have trauma, we cope. And overthinking is a common coping mechanism when we're feeling disconnected. And I realized I was holding my breath when I'm overthinking. So breathing, I invite our audience to breathe, because I think this can be a lot of heavy information, and that's number one, self-care. And I've learned that breath really does connect us mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And to help us come out of our head and back into our body, an embodiment process. And part of embodying is recognizing that we're connected to everything. That I think colonization like really has disconnected us. Like you said, it disconnected us from the land. It disconnected us from each other. I was grateful to do a blanket ceremony at McMaster University several years ago with grandmother Renee, who I since realized is one of your co-founding partners of Grandmother's Voice, which is based in Milton. And if our audience, if you haven't done a blanket exercise, highly recommended that you seek out. It's not, I wouldn't say it's standardized by any mean, but I think it's a pretty common exercise to see the effects of colonization and how everybody was separated. And this plays out that we feel separate from each other. Like how often loneliness is like part of the mental health crisis as well, that leads to addiction, that leads to suicide, as you mentioned. And so sorry to hear about your father, and how
Thank you.
oppression has influenced your family. And I'm so grateful for you for having the courage. I imagine that some of the answers that you received from ancestors, received from spirit, and from the elements, was your clear path. Was that grandmother's voice? Was that part of the answer that you received?
Actually, I realized that well, my grandmother, it was my grandmother's voice is grandmother's voice. And the messages that I began to hear, and the spirit that began to show up for me to support me, was my grandmother, my great grandmother, and grandmother Renee Thomas Hill. Our great grandmothers are sisters, actually. So yeah, surprise. And I met her and Gail Whitlow when I part of my journey was to do my genealogy. And I received all of my genealogy from my uncle. He's my only living uncle, like family, from my dad's side. And he had created and put together this genealogy book that showed the census forms. And so, yeah, that's how I met Renee at Gail's place, Ancestral Voices on Six Nations. And so it was, I had been doing this work, this healing work for, my 20, it was probably about 12 years before I met them, and had my children. And then it was, it was this hard shift. One day, stop what you're doing. It's time to do it's time to do this work. And that's when I met them and realized, that they were doing this work. Grandmothers, Indigenous grandmothers, had been preserving, and there's been many more elders, but these grandmas were traveling internationally to pray for world peace. And it was, it's not a secret. Everyone knew that these women were doing this. It was just a really loud, it's time. And so we started to travel together, and they started to, share knowledge with me. And it was, there's grandmother circles all over the world, and communities. And now, and through this work we did together, that clearer message was it's time. It's going to be time very soon. And so I felt like, like grandmother's voice through the pandemic, we just went live on Facebook. I had no idea this is what I would do. oh, the grandma said, we need to reach people. How do we do that? And this was like 2 weeks into the pandemic. And I was like, I think we can go live on Facebook, and they want to hear from you, and they need to hear from you. So yeah, that's kind of, that's where we went. And I think now where we are is we've realized that colonization also stopped community building. Even though the, organizations and communities have all of these different organizations to build community, we as the people are having a hard time building community. We're building like little silos of, competitive sports and, things that are taking us really away from the culture and the culture of being together, of community. And so I really believe that this is a time for the Indigenous life ways to raise the people, bring us together again, and that's what I can do as one person, is do what I do. I have no fear in bringing people together. There is always residue when it comes to, being ostracized or talked about, or, people challenge what you're doing in your community. And that residue is painful, and it brings back trauma. And it's a lot of times not even my own trauma. Being an empath and someone who can, recognize other people's energy. There's just times when our spirit is, sometimes I'm not as strong as I want to be at certain times in this work. And so that's what community's for, is to hold each other up and to stand with each other when we see someone else is doing really good work, and maybe isn't feeling supported. In the time, it's when people can see this. And that's why you build community, so that you can support each other. And that's why it's important for self-care, because if you are not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And this is our purpose. This is our purpose in the world. It's supposed to be. That's why we come here, to learn how to live in this physical world and know that, self-care is important.
Self-care is important. Community care is important. So would you say that competition is a colonial mindset?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, I can't speak to the teachings, of like lacrosse or those, creators games that, there's competition, but it's good in a good way. Mm-hmm. Right. And I have so much I could say right now just about, my son's, AAA and competitive sports, through his lifetime. But this is a reality in the world. This is, and not just sports, life.
Yes. Business.
Walking past somebody in a store has more than you, or abundance, or shows that they have, this is what this society created. Jealousy, negative, all this negative way of thinking, when really, we should be, happy for the people that have found their way. Anyways, yeah, there's so much. Keep me on track, would you?
You just need to do a season, just you and I.
I could, I think, I think these conversations are needed. Mm-hmm. Because there's people listening that maybe they don't have anyone to engage in this conversation. And that's what I've learned with Grandmother's Voice, from getting feedback from people. We want to hear more. I want to hear more, because it's easy for people to just show up and listen. Mm-hmm. Gives them courage to get to the next one. And so these conversations, I know, are extremely important for those who don't have the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I think what you had said, so many people are just surviving. And I think that's part of the economic system. It's putting a lot of pressure on people, that families are in silos, the so-called nuclear family, and people are dealing with young children and aging families. And I believe that's part of the effect of colonization, that that it's very divisive, that there's like this hierarchy. There's a lot of comparison-itis, but a lot of people are just got blinders on. They just got to do what they got to do. There's not a lot of time and space for self-reflection. And yet, really, that's where healing happens, your point, to self-care. And how do we shift our culture so that we're more of a circle? How do we come back to the village values and really connect and support each other more unconditionally? Like I've heard it said that, because so often I think the colonial, I think there's something to healthy competition. Like, how do we, again, we tend to compete to tear each other down rather than compete to build each other up. And that is part of the mindset that was my goal of having these conversations. And how do we start to look at things differently? Because that's spirituality, that's mental health. And
yeah, I think too, and just kind of closing, because I know we're pretty close to our time today together, but Indigenous life ways were supposed to be here for people. If colonization didn't happen, and we looked at, and we look at the two-row wampum, the ship and the canoe, and you have your values, we have ours, and we'll do this journey together, and the elements of the earth, land, and air, or earth, land, or earth, water, and air, or however you want to say that, but we're to live in this together. And how do we do it? Indigenous people have amazing life ways. They're holistic, WHOL, not. And so if we can just acknowledge that that's what was removed, the ethics, the values, we relied on churches that have now disappointed millions of people. And now they're like, what do we do? Let's just all spend time on the land and know that if we take care of her, that's then returning us back to taking care of each other. And that's that whole, cycle of life. And that's what we need to, I make it sound so simple or easy. That's how I see it. And just kind of acknowledging what you're saying about children and parents and life. And what I remember is, or what I know is, the teachings are that they're our responsibility. And elders are important, and our children are our future. Yes. And we have to change our way of thinking, that we're meant to be here today to live a good life, and know that these are all values added to our life and society. And the minute we let one go and think that they're not important, we've done something wrong. So we have to wake up every day and say, I'm going to take care of my children. I'm going to make the elders feel needed and wanted. I'm going to make sure that everybody has a voice and is included. That's all we have to do as individuals, and the world will become a better place. And then all the other noise will just, become noise.
That's a beautiful place for a conclusion. Thank you so much for your time and attention today, Jody Harbour. Where can people find you?
Oh, Grandmother's Voice. Follow us, come and join us. We've just been evolving, and we're evolving because it's, anyone can come. And we want to do this from that Indigenous voice that was left out for so long. Yes.
And I love that you want to bring community together, Indigenous and settlers and descendants and immigrants, that there's space for everybody there to learn these values. The moon circles, especially, I particularly enjoy. And so grateful for everybody's attention today. Thank you for coming out. We spoke about, I think, trauma, connections, breath, self-care, community are some of the themes that emerged today for us to reflect on. Thank you so much for your time today, Jody.
Yeah, well, sisters, take care.
This will be.
Ona.